días a todos. Good morning, everyone. And bonjour tout le monde, or as if they would say in my community, que lo que mi gente? It is an honor to be here to share the space and be in the presence of such brilliant scholars. I myself am still a scholar in training. My name is Ayleen Paola Correa Rodriguez. I am a Caribbeanist, historian, anthropologist, an aunt turned mother, a daughter, a sister. But more than anything, I am always becoming, learning, and aspiring. And none of this would be possible without the people and communities, including a space like this that pour into my imperfect cup, which I sometimes hold with care, but sadly, well, other times I spill over with the weight of my own ignorance, but we're learning. My paper, Caring Laterally Through Violence, Cuarenta's transformation from a torture site to a community, examines the ways in which spaces of state-led violence are re-inhabited, repurposed, and reimagined. This ongoing project draws on spatial ethnography, interviews, soundscaping, and archival materials from and beyond the Dominican Republic. And I want to start actually here, where we are today. We are gathered today in the Panama Canal Museum, a site that commemorates one of the world's greatest engineering feats. Though officially completed in 1913, the dream of the canal dates back to Spanish colonial ambitions in the 1500s. It was sold as a project of international progress and national development, but this rhetoric obscures the past and the present of the space. The canal was built largely by Black Caribbean laborers, especially from Barbados, under racially stratified government contracts that divided workers into gold and silver categories, what Foucault might call allowed to live versus left to die. By the end of construction, factor in previous failed attempts by many, an estimated 500 workers died per mile. Over 25,000 lives. And that number does not include those who later died from disease caused by inhumane working conditions or the impact to the environment. This canal is more than an economic artery. It is a mass grave, a landscape of violent death enmeshed in what Panamanian novelist Cristina Enriquez recently described as a history of capitalist celebration enveloped in human devastation. Though my research is not on Panama, its history made me reflect on how deadly projects are often buried under the guise of development. From the privatization of land in Panama and Puerto Rico, to the destructions of homes in Ukraine and Palestine, and the same US that has and ever more now continues to obscure violence under the guise of democracy. Histories of state violence and displacement echo across time and space. And now this brings me to my research site, La Cuarenta, in the Dominican Republic. Located in Cristo Rey, un barrio in Santo Domingo, la capital de la República, La Cuarenta carries the marks of state-led development projects during Joaquin Balaguer's presidency, specifically in the late 60s to the early 80s. These are the images of what it was in the past, and we'll get there. But what it is now is a medical dispensary, a shelter, and rent-to-own housing, among other infrastructures that were built, creating a spatial landscape that some see as a sign of community progress, while others recognize it as a site of ongoing erasure. Because La Cuarenta was not just a development project. It was once a torture site under the 31-year-long authoritarian regime of Rafael Leonidas Trujillo. And Balaguer, the post-dictatorship president, was actually Trujillo's right-hand man during the regime. an important detail that adds texture to the redemocratization process, not only of the nation, but of La Cuarenta itself. During Trujillo's regime, La Cuarenta underwent many transformations. Originally an informal, unnamed neighborhood, it became part of a sequence of numbered streets from 34 to 49. Community members recall it as puro montes y culebra. Nothing was there, where migrating families built small casitas, while wealthier residents established ranchos, producing mangoes, herbs, and plantains, or lavish houses on the outskirts of the growing city. And one of those ranchos was what the dictatorship took power over. La Cuarenta also became synonymous then, not only with the street, but also with terror. It was the site of Trujillo's largest clandestine interrogation center, named simply after the street it occupied. Thousands of men, women, and even young adults were tortured, raped, and killed within its walls. Others were disappeared, condemned to a death unbodied, their names still unknown till this day. Cries tore through the forced silence of its cells, while acts of solidarity, love, and communal labor were etched into the bloodstained floors. And this is what makes this clandestine torture site everything but clandestine. Today, the streets surrounding the former La Cuarenta torture site remain hollow, with the street number Cuarenta renamed to Calle de los Mártires, or the Street of Martyrs. Children play basketball on the cracked school court, their laughter echoing off the pavement. But with each footstep, the ground stirs. And I don't mean this in a poetic sense, although I love poetry. It's actually unleashing the violence the soil was forced to absorb. In this community that is now a predominant Black, Haitian, Dominican, and Dominican Haitian community that has been now underdeveloped, many community members consider the name of the street, Mártires, or Martyrs, a marker of remembrance of the past. But others see it as a symbol of hope for a future yet to be realized. Considering histories of violence, the perpetuation of unfreedoms in the name of control and power, the destruction of kinship networks of trust, the trauma that disrupts the dimensions of time, I wondered how. How does a community, once surrounded by blood, become one surrounded by hope? How can a physical space such as a former torture site keep or perhaps embody an affective connection like home or community or love for so many people? Las Fundadoras, a group of women who have always lived within the surroundings of the now Calle de los Mártires, whether as children themselves witnessing the horrors of the La Cuarenta torture site, or as children of those who did, have become my main experts in understanding these questions. One of the fundadoras describes a memory from growing up around the torture site, seeing a man tied to a post slowly die from his wounds and dehydration. She shared with me that upon returning home, she knew not to ask what happened to the man. Mi madre me enseñó mejor. She also knew she couldn't help the man without risking her whole family. She would later learn that it was not her family that would be at risk, but actually the whole neighborhood. The reality could be best described through Diana Taylor's concept of percepticide, which she used to describe the dirty war in Argentina. A culture of everyone knowing, but nobody speaking. A culture of knowing that, quote, killing your senses, end quote, was the condition for survival. This silence became the trauma that those who survived must live in slow death post-dictatorship, while those who were killed during the regime may loudly yearn for the rebirth of truth. For Las Fundadoras, reclaiming streets, building homes, and creating communities Such community spaces such as churches, schools, were not just symbols of transition. They were acts of violence to bury a violent past. During these projects for development, the fundadoras, as children, saw how their ancestors resisted displacement, disguised as progress under Balaguer's post-Trujillo Dominican Republic. Yet the deeper transformation in the space lied within the ways the people, like las fundadoras, remembered and cared for one another amid the buried ruins of La Cuarenta and its history. As Teresa, one of las fundadoras, recalled, mi madre nos recordaba que la seguridad de nosotros y de nuestros hogares, nuestros vecinos y comunidad era la responsabilidad de todos. While La Cuarenta remained haunted, and in some ways still is, las fundadoras refused to live in the perpetuation of percepticide, the numbing denial of violence for survival. Instead, they engaged in what Christina Sharp, in her book In the Wake on Blackness and Being, calls wake work, a labor of both remembrance and radical imagination. They became the first teachers at the newly built school, the caregivers to the sick and elderly, and organizers of a social fabric rooted in historical consciousness. They did not forget their past. They turned it into an unapologetic dream of a future where violence was not the norm. Borrowing from anthropologist Rebecca Carter's ethnography on New Orleans, las fundadoras became social mothers of the community. Chelo, another fundadora, described how she and other early residents helped raise the neighborhood's children, babysitting, running errands, tending to the land, being their first teachers. Later, she too became really enveloped with the kids and after-school programs, where she actively taught the neighborhood's history inside and outside the classroom. Las fundadoras and other community members also organized annual commemorations every January to honor the lives lost and to continue the work of healing. Through mutual care, they transformed La Cuarenta from a site of terror into a home, rejecting the poison of percepticide. This commitment to care planted hope in soil fertilized with violence. As Sharp writes, caring laterally, which is part of the wake work as it resists colonial individualizations of well-being, becomes an effective force that binds communities when fear threatens to divide them. By remembering past atrocities, voicing one's forbidden silences, and reclaiming the ruins of violence through acts of love, las fundadoras activated healing, not as a symbolic gesture, but as an ongoing practice. As Chelo put it, yo conozco mi comunidad, yo vivo en mi historia. O as Teresa reflected on the government-imposed displacement of their neighborhood, ensangrentaron nuestros hogares, pero siguen siendo nuestros hogares. Nosotros los reclamamos. Like scars on a body, time and infrastructure reshaped Cristo Rey. Its church, school, and shelter physically transforming former La Cuarenta from what it was to what it is. But neighborhoods are not just physical spaces. They're landscapes of meaning. Borrowing from Taino healing traditions, we understand that true healing is not just of the body, but of the mind and spirit. And the post-dictatorship falls flat when it reduces trauma to a material wound, one that can be sutured with new buildings or new political regimes. The transformation of La Cuarenta cannot be measured solely in roads paved or houses built. It must also be measured in the shift in ethics of care, in the ways people reject silence and remain in the commitment to reclaim their voice. Without a formal national reckoning, las fundadoras created their own post-dictatorship, where percepticide slowly gave way to a radical ethics of care that both remembers and dreams of a future. I want to end with the words of a fundadora who prefers to remain unnamed. She shared these words with me, reflecting on the trauma of percepticide, the silence once necessary for survival. And she shared this story thinking about herself born as a child in this space. I'll read it in English, the translation, but you'll see the original in Spanish on the slide. She said, "I am glad I was silent back then. Today, I can carry the truth that so many of us know and that many of my compatriots died for. I can carry our truth forward. My silence haunted me for years, but I am grateful to be alive today so I can tell you the story. Write it. I don't have much time. I am old, but people must know." Thank you.